The last thing Alina Carter expected to hear at her father's 70th birthday dinner was that she no longer had a place in the family business she had spent 15 years helping to save. The words did not come from her father. They came from her younger brother, Michael, who stood at the head of the long dining table in the private room of a restaurant overlooking the river. Behind him, through tall windows, the city lights shimmered in the dark water. Around the table sat relatives, old family friends, employees from Carter and Sons Furniture, and 3 people from the local bank. Alina had thought the dinner was only a celebration for her father, Thomas. She had even arranged the flowers, ordered the cake, and made sure the chef prepared the low-sodium meal her father's doctor had recommended. She had spent the entire week balancing birthday details with payroll, supplier calls, and a difficult contract negotiation that could determine whether the business survived another year. Michael lifted his glass and smiled as though he were announcing wonderful news. "Dad has decided it's time for the next generation to take the company forward," he said. "Starting next month, I'll be president of Carter and Sons." There was applause. Alina clapped too, at first out of reflex. She knew Michael had wanted the title for years, and she had never cared much about titles. She cared about whether invoices were paid, whether workers kept their jobs, whether customers came back, whether their father could sleep at night. But then Michael continued. "And to simplify management," he said, "we're restructuring the executive team. Alina will be stepping away from operations so the company can move in a more unified direction." Alina's hands stopped moving. She looked at her father. Thomas stared down at his plate. Her mother, Ruth, reached for her water without meeting Alina's eyes. "Stepping away?" Alina repeated, Michael's smile tight. "We'll talk later." "No," Alina said quietly. "We can talk now." The room became still enough for her to hear the air conditioning vent above them. Thomas finally looked up. His face carried the tired, guarded expression Alina had seen whenever he was afraid of conflict. "Honey, tonight is my birthday." "I know, I planned it." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Michael put down his glass. "This isn't personal." Alina almost laughed. She had heard those words in business meetings when someone was about to do something deeply personal and wanted to avoid responsibility for it. She looked at her father again. "Did you decide this?" Thomas hesitated for half a second. It was enough. That half second told Alina what the rest of the evening could not. "Yes," he said. The answer hit harder than Michael's announcement. Alina had joined Carter and Sons when she was 24, after graduating with a degree in supply chain management and accepting a job at a national retailer in Chicago. She had lasted there 11 months before her father called and told her the family company was in trouble. A warehouse fire had destroyed inventory. 2 major customers had gone bankrupt. The bank was threatening to reduce their credit line. Thomas had sounded older on the phone than he had 2 weeks earlier. "Just come home for 6 months," he had asked. "Help me get organized." 6 months became 15 years. Alina rebuilt inventory systems, negotiated new supplier terms, brought the company online, cut shipping waste, developed relationships with boutique hotels, and persuaded her father to stop relying on handwritten purchase orders. During the recession, she had taken a temporary pay cut while working 60-hour weeks. When Thomas had his first heart scare, Alina had effectively run the company for 5 months without telling him how serious the cash flow problem had become. She refinanced equipment, delayed her own salary twice, and personally called more than 80 customers to keep orders from disappearing. Michael, meanwhile, had moved to California, tried 2 startups, lost money in both, and returned home 3 years earlier with confidence, expensive shoes, and a talent for making his ideas sound bigger than they were. Thomas adored him. Alina had always told herself that was all right. She did not need applause. She did not need to be the favorite. She only needed to know the family understood that she had stayed when staying was difficult. Now in front of everyone, she realized they did not understand at all. "What does stepping away mean?" she asked. Michael answered this time. "You'll keep your ownership interest, obviously, but you won't be involved in daily decisions. We're creating an advisory role for you." An advisory role. It sounded polite. What it meant was that she would be removed from the office, stripped of authority, and called only when Michael wanted her signature. Effective when? Monday. Alina turned toward her father. "You were going to let me find out like this?" Thomas rubbed his forehead. Michael thought it would be better to make one clean announcement. Michael thought, "Alina," Ruth whispered, "please don't make a scene." That sentence hurt more than anything else. Alina looked around the table. Employees who had worked beside her for a decade were staring at their napkins. Aunt Susan looked close to tears. The bank manager, Mr. Howard, avoided eye contact entirely. Everyone seemed to know something Alina had not known. She understood then that the decision had not been made that afternoon. It had been discussed, planned, agreed to. Her own family had held conversations about removing her while she worked late in the office protecting the company they were discussing. She stood, I hope the new direction works, she said. Thomas pushed his chair back. Where are you going? Home. The cake hasn't even come. Alina looked at him, and for the first time in her life she felt no urge to make his discomfort easier. Happy birthday, Dad. She picked up her coat and walked out. In the parking lot, she sat behind the wheel of her car and did not start the engine. Her hands trembled in her lap. She told herself she was angry, but anger was easier than the truth. The truth was that she felt foolish. For years, friends had asked why she worked so hard for the family company when her father still introduced Michael as the one who will take over someday. Alina always laughed it off. She said she did not care. She said family was not a competition. She said her father trusted her with the things that mattered. Now she understood that being trusted to carry the weight was not the same as being trusted to lead. Her phone buzzed. A message from Michael appeared. Don't overreact. We can talk tomorrow. Alina stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then another message arrived, this one from her mother. Please come back. Your father is upset. Alina almost replied, so am I instead. She turned off her phone and drove home. Her apartment was only 12 minutes from the restaurant, but that night the drive felt longer. Every traffic light seemed to give her time to remember something she had sacrificed. The job in Chicago she had loved. The graduate program she had postponed and never returned to. The engagement to a patient man named Aaron, who had eventually told her that he could not build a marriage with someone who was married to an emergency. You always say your family needs you, he had said the night they ended it. But I don't think they'll ever stop needing you because you never let them learn how to stand without you. At the time, Alina had thought he did not understand loyalty. Now, sitting alone in her apartment, she wondered if he had understood it better than she had. On Monday morning, Alina arrived at Carter & Sons at 7:30, exactly as she had every weekday for years. The building was quiet. The smell of sawdust from the manufacturing floor drifted into the hallway. Her office light flicked on automatically. There were 2 cardboard boxes on her desk. For a moment, she simply stood there. A printed note lay on top. Alina, please pack personal items. It will transfer files needed for the advisory role. Michael will meet with you at 9:00. No signature was necessary. At 8:15, her assistant Nina arrived and froze in the doorway. Oh my God. Alina gave a tired smile. Good morning. Nina's eyes filled with tears. They can't do this. They already did. We should all walk out. No. Alina's voice was sharper than she intended. Don't do that. Nina folded her arms. Why are you protecting them? Alina looked at the boxes. I don't know. That answer frightened her. At 9, Michael entered without knocking. He wore a navy suit and the confidence of a man who believed the hard part had already been completed by someone else. Dad wanted to come, he said, but his blood pressure is up. Alina kept packing books. Michael closed the door. You embarrassed him Saturday. Alina placed a framed photo of herself and her parents into the box. You removed me from the company at his birthday dinner. We announced a leadership transition. You announced my removal before telling me. You knew there were concerns. No, I knew you were frustrated that I questioned your expansion plan. Michael sighed. This is exactly the problem. Every idea has to go through you. Every decision becomes a debate. Because your expansion plan requires borrowing $8 million against company property. It's growth. It's debt. It's calculated risk. You have no signed contracts to support it. Michael's face hardened. Dad agrees with me. There it was, the only argument Michael had ever truly needed. Alina looked at him. Then you don't need me. He paused, perhaps expecting her to fight. She took her laptop from its dock and placed it on the desk. Company property. Alina, don't be dramatic. You'll still receive distributions. I'm not talking about money. Then what are you talking about? She almost answered respect. She almost said trust, gratitude, 15 years of my life. But she knew Michael would treat those words like weaknesses. Instead, she said, nothing. She finished packing. Before leaving, she walked through the manufacturing floor. Employees stopped machines and watched her. Some hugged her, some looked angry. An older craftsman named Louis, who had been with the company since Alina was a child, took off his safety glasses and said, your grandfather would not like this. Alina swallowed hard. Her grandfather had founded Carter & Sons in a rented garage 48 years earlier. The word sons had been chosen before Thomas had children. When Alina was 10, she once asked why it did not say Carter and children. Her grandfather had laughed. Then you grow up and change it. She never had. At the loading dock, Nina caught up to her. Where will you go? Alina looked out at the trucks backing toward the warehouse. I don't know. That was the first time in 15 years she had said those words about her future. For the first few days, not knowing felt almost peaceful. Alina slept until 8. She drank coffee without checking freight schedules. She walked through a park at noon and noticed how many people had lives that did not revolve around supplier delays. She cleaned closets. She bought groceries in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. She sat in a cafe with a book, and discovered she could read 3 pages before reaching automatically for a phone that no longer buzzed every few minutes. Then peace became silence. Her phone, once a constant stream of work messages, barely rang. She had built her identity around being useful, and without urgent problems arriving every 10 minutes, she felt strangely invisible. At first, she resented Carter and Sons for taking so much from her. Then she resented herself for missing it. Her mother called almost every evening. "How are you?" "Fine. Your father misses you. He knows where I live. Please don't punish him." "I'm not punishing anyone," Ruth would sigh. "You know how your father is with conflict." Alina began to hate that sentence. Everyone in the family had spent decades protecting Thomas from difficult conversations. Ruth softened bad news. Alina fixed problems before he saw them. Michael learned that if he pushed hard enough, Thomas eventually agreed just to restore peace. Even their grandmother, before she died, used to say, "Your father has a tender heart," as though tenderness made avoidance noble. Perhaps the family had not betrayed Alina in one moment. Perhaps they had built the betrayal slowly, year after year, every time they expected her to absorb pain because she was the strong one. 2 weeks after she left, Alina received a call from Mr. Howard at the bank. "I'm not calling in an official capacity," he said. "That sentence always means something bad." He hesitated. Michael submitted the expansion financing package. Alina closed her eyes. "How much?" "8.4 million. And Dad signed?" "Yes." She walked to the window. "Why are you telling me?" "Because the projections look like yours." "They aren't." "That's what I was afraid of." Alina felt her stomach tighten. Months earlier, she had prepared a conservative expansion analysis to show Thomas why Michael's plan was too risky. Her model assumed phased construction, signed customer commitments, and a much smaller loan. Michael had apparently taken her work and changed the assumptions. "Howard, I'm no longer an officer. I can't speak for the company." "I know." "Then treat their application like any other application." There was silence. "Alina," he said, "your family home is part of the collateral package." She turned from the window. "What?" "The property on Maple Ridge." Her parents had lived in that house for 32 years. Thomas had refinanced it once to help the company survive the warehouse fire, but Alina had believed the loan was repaid. "Does my mother know?" "I can't answer that." "You just did." That evening, Alina drove to her parents' house. Ruth opened the door in an apron, surprised but happy. "You came. Where's Dad?" "In the den." Thomas sat in his old leather chair watching baseball with the sound turned low. When Alina entered, he smiled with relief. "There's my girl." The phrase nearly disarmed her. She remained standing. "Did you mortgage the house for Michael's expansion?" Thomas's smile disappeared. Ruth stopped in the doorway. "Alina," he said, "how did you hear about that?" "So it's true." "It's temporary." Ruth looked at him. "What mortgage?" The room changed. Alina turned slowly toward her mother. "You didn't tell her?" Thomas stood. "I was going to." "When?" "Once everything was finalized." Ruth's face went pale. "Tom, what did you do?" "It's business. The house has equity. The company does not need this expansion," Alina said. "Michael wants it." Thomas pointed toward her. "This is why we needed a change. You always see danger. Michael sees opportunity. And when opportunity fails, who cleans it up?" Thomas's jaw tight. "I'm not discussing business with someone who walked away." Alina stared at him. "I walked away. You left that night. You removed me from the company. You could have stayed as an advisor." "As an advisor with no authority while Michael used my financial models to borrow against your house?" Thomas flinched. Ruth whispered, "He used her models? I don't know what documents he used." Alina felt old anger rise, but beneath it was something sadder. Her father truly did not know. He had signed because Michael asked him to believe. "Dad, please listen to me. Don't close this loan. Slow down. Require signed purchase commitments. Get an independent review." Thomas looked toward the dark television screen. "Michael says waiting will cost us the market." Alina stepped closer. "Michael has been president for 2 weeks. I have managed the company's cash for 12 years. If you never trusted me before, trust me now." Thomas's eyes moved to hers. For 1 second she thought he might. Then he said, "I have to let him lead." Something inside Alina became still. "All right," she said. Ruth reached for her arm. "Don't leave angry." "I'm not angry." That was almost true. She looked at her father. "I hope he's right." She left before anyone could see her cry. 3 days later, Alina received a message from a former client named Vanessa Cole, owner of a growing chain of small boutique hotels. Vanessa had worked with Carter and Sons for 6 years and had become friendly with Alina through countless design revisions and late-night delivery problems. "Heard you're no longer there. Want to have coffee?" They met on Saturday. Vanessa listened as Alina carefully described the leadership transition without criticizing her family. When Alina finished, Vanessa stirred her coffee and said, "You realize I bought from Carter because of you. The company makes good furniture. Lots of companies make good furniture. You answered the phone when our hotel in Nashville flooded 3 days before opening. That was my job." "No, your job was to sell us furniture." You found 12 replacement rooms of furniture in 2 states, rented a truck, and had your warehouse manager drive overnight. Alina smiled faintly. Louis still complains about that. Vanessa leaned forward. I'm opening 3 properties next year. I need someone to manage procurement across all of them. Come work for me. Alina blinked. Doing what? Exactly what you've been doing for your family, except I'll pay you for it and say thank you. Alina laughed for the first time in weeks. The offer was generous. More importantly, it was hers. She accepted. The new job was uncomfortable at first because nobody expected Alina to be available 24 hours a day. Vanessa told her to stop answering emails after 7. Her colleagues asked her opinion and then actually waited for the answer. When a project succeeded, her name appeared in the meeting summary. When a project struggled, no one looked at her as though she had personally failed the family. Alina discovered how starved she had been for ordinary professional respect. Still, every morning she checked the business section for any mention of Carter and Sons. Michael's expansion moved quickly. He leased a showroom in Dallas, announced a partnership with a celebrity interior designer, and hired a marketing agency that created glossy videos about the new Carter era. Thomas appeared in one of them, smiling beside Michael in the factory. Alina watched the video twice. She hated herself for watching it. The first time she focused on the numbers. The second time she focused on her father's face. He looked proud, younger somehow. It was the expression she had wanted to see after every year she saved the company money, every crisis she solved, every vacation she canceled. She closed the laptop and told herself not to be childish. Then she cried anyway. At Thanksgiving, Ruth asked her to come home. Michael will be there, Alina asked. He's your brother. That wasn't my question. Yes, Alina almost refused. Then her mother said, I don't want to spend the rest of my life having 2 children who won't sit at the same table. So Alina went. The dining room looked exactly as it always had. Same china, same candles, same framed photographs on the wall. Michael arrived late with his wife, Claire, and their 8-year-old son, Noah. He kissed Ruth's cheek, shook Thomas's hand, and gave Alina a careful nod. Hey. 2 hours, everyone behaved like polite strangers. Then Thomas asked Michael about Dallas. Michael bright. Showroom traffic is ahead of forecast. Alina kept eating. We're already talking about Houston next, Michael continued. Thomas beamed. That's my boy. The old phrase landed like a stone. Alina placed her fork down. Michael glanced at her. What? Nothing. You made a face. I didn't. You always do that. You sit there silently judging. Ruth closed her eyes. Alina looked at Michael. Do you really want to do this at Thanksgiving? I want one dinner where everyone isn't pretending I stole something from you. Alina laughed once without humor. You announced my removal in public. I didn't remove you, Dad did. Thomas spoke sharply. Enough. Michael ignored him. You never believed I could run the company. That's not true. It is. I questioned your financing plan. You questioned everything I did. Because you returned after 12 years away and expected the company to reorganize around you. Michael pushed back from the table. And there it is. What? You think the company belonged to you because you suffered more? Alina stared at him. Michael's voice grew quieter. You think because you stayed, you earned Dad? The room went silent. Alina felt as if he had opened a door she had spent years pretending was not there. This isn't about Dad. Michael shook his head. It has always been about Dad. Thomas stood. I said enough. But now Alina was looking only at her brother. You think I wanted your place? You had it. I had his emergencies. You had his trust. I had his bills, his hospital paperwork, his panic calls at midnight, his company when he couldn't make payroll. You had Christmas visits and golf weekends. Michael's face changed. Alina continued, years of swallowed words rising at once. Do you know what Dad said when I was 24? 6 months. He needed 6 months. I gave him 15 years. And you made sure everyone knew it. I never said a word. You didn't have to. Mom said it. Dad said it. Every employee said it. Alina saved this. Alina fixed that. Alina stayed. You became the family saint and there was no room left for anyone else. Alina's eyes burned. So your answer was to push me out? Michael looked down. The anger in the room suddenly seemed exhausted. Noah, sitting at the end of the table, whispered, Dad. Claire put a hand on his shoulder. Michael stood. We should go. Ruth began crying. Thomas walked out of the room. And Alina realized that family betrayal was rarely clean enough to choose one villain. She had been wronged. She knew that. But for the first time, she saw that Michael's resentment had roots. While she had believed she was being ignored, he had believed he could never return without being compared to the sister who had never left. Understanding did not erase what he had done. It only made hating him more difficult. The day after Thanksgiving, Alina woke with a headache and 3 missed calls from her mother. She did not return them. She spent the morning cleaning an apartment that was already clean, then drove to a small bookstore across town because she needed to be somewhere no one knew her name. She had been there less than 20 minutes when Claire called. Alina almost let it go to voicemail. Claire had never been unkind to her, but she was Michael's wife, and lately every conversation felt as though it belonged to one side or the other. She answered. Hi, can we talk? Claire asked. If this is about last night, it's not, or maybe it is, but not the way you think. There was something in Claire's voice that made Alina step outside. What happened? Claire was quiet for a moment. Michael hasn't been sleeping. Alina leaned against the brick wall beside the bookstore entrance. Why? He says it's work, he says expansion is stressful, but I found him at 3 in the morning sitting in the kitchen with spreadsheets open. He didn't even know I was there. Alina said nothing. Claire continued. He took out a personal line of credit too. What? Against our house. Alina closed her eyes. How much? I don't know exactly. He says it's temporary. The phrase was so familiar that Alina nearly laughed. Claire, you need to know exactly. I know, then ask him. And don't accept business language as an answer. You have a right to know what your home is securing. I did ask, Claire's voice cracked. He said I wouldn't understand. Alina felt anger rise on Claire's behalf. That isn't acceptable. I know. There was a long pause, then Claire said, I'm sorry. For what? For not saying anything when he pushed you out. Alina stared at the traffic moving past. You knew? Not everything. I knew he and your father were discussing leadership changes. Michael kept saying you would never allow him to lead while you were there. I told myself it was between siblings. I told myself you were strong enough to handle it. Alina almost smiled at the bitter coincidence. Everyone had trusted her strength enough to excuse their silence. Claire, she said softly, please don't ever use my strength as a reason not to do the right thing. Claire began to cry. I'm sorry. Alina let the silence sit between them. Then she said, find out what Michael signed. Protect yourself and Noah. Whatever happens with the company, don't let pride make decisions for your family. When the call ended, Alina remained outside the bookstore, watching people hurry along the sidewalk with shopping bags and coffee cups. She wanted to feel satisfied. Michael was discovering that leadership was heavier than applause. Instead, she felt dread. She knew what desperation looked like in a family business. It rarely arrived screaming. It arrived dressed as optimism. One more loan. More quarter, one more chance for sales to catch up, one more promise that nobody needed to worry yet. At work on Monday, Vanessa noticed Alina staring at the same email for several minutes. Family? She asked. Alina looked up. Is it that obvious? Only because I've met families. Alina told her a shortened version of the situation. Vanessa listened and then said, what are you going to do? Nothing. Good, Alina blinked. You expected me to tell you to run back and save everyone. Vanessa asked, a little. No, they made a decision without you. They're entitled to experience the consequences without you. Alina looked toward the window. What if employees lose their jobs? That's the hard part. I know those people. I know. What if my parents lose their house? Vanessa was quiet. That would be harder. Alina rubbed her forehead. Vanessa leaned forward. Helping someone in danger is different from volunteering to become responsible for every decision they make. If a moment comes when you choose to help, make sure you're helping because it's what you want to do, not because they trained you to believe disaster is yours to prevent. The words stayed with Alina. December brought the first visible signs that the expansion was failing. One supplier called Alina at her new office, not realizing she had left Carter and Sons. When she explained, the man apologized and then asked whether she knew why invoices were now 60 days late. She did not. A week later, Louis sent her a message. They cut overtime. Something's wrong. Alina stared at the message for several minutes before replying. Take care of yourself. Don't make decisions based on rumors. Louis replied almost immediately. We miss you. She did not know what to say to that, so she sent a heart. Near Christmas, Nina called from her car. I'm not supposed to tell you this. Then don't. We lost Meridian. Alina sat up straight. Meridian Hotels had been the largest contract in Michael's expansion forecast, a multi-property deal that could have justified part of the Dallas showroom investment. What happened? They went with a manufacturer in North Carolina, lower price and guaranteed delivery. Did Carter have a signed letter of intent? No. Alina closed her eyes. Michael had treated a conversation as a commitment. How is cash? I don't know. But accounting is holding checks until Michael approves them one by one. That was enough. Alina knew exactly what it meant when a company stopped paying according to normal process and began deciding which creditor could wait the longest. Nina, don't tell me anything else. Why? Because I'm a shareholder and no longer management. I don't want you violating confidentiality. I just thought you should know. I know, Nina's voice softened. Are you going to help? Alina looked at the framed photograph on her desk from a new hotel opening in Savannah. She was standing beside Vanessa and a team of people who had thanked her publicly. I don't know. Christmas Eve was worse than Thanksgiving because everyone tried harder. Thomas insisted on making his traditional roast. Ruth played old music. Noah wore a sweater with blinking reindeer. Michael brought expensive wine that no one opened because Thomas was taking new medication. Alina arrived with gifts and a promise to herself that she would stay exactly 2 hours. For 90 minutes it worked. Then Thomas asked if she could take a quick look at something after dinner. Alina froze. Michael stared at his plate. What? She asked. Just some numbers. Her pulse rose. No, Thomas looked surprised. Alina, it would take 10 minutes. No, Ruth whispered. Honey? Alina put down her napkin. This is what always happens. Nobody wants my opinion until the consequences arrive. Then suddenly I'm family again. Michael said. I didn't ask him to ask you. I believe you. Thomas's face reddened. I am asking my daughter for help, and I am saying no. He stared at her as if she had spoken in another language. Alina's voice shook, but she continued. Dad, you chose Michael to run the company. You told me you had to let him lead, then let him lead. Thomas looked hurt. Old part of Alina immediately wanted to apologize. She forced herself to remain still. After dinner, she helped Ruth wash dishes. Her mother was unusually quiet. Finally, Ruth said, I don't know what happened to this family. Alina dried a plate. Yes, you do. Ruth's hands stopped in the sink. You knew they were going to remove me. Her mother's shoulders lowered. I knew they were talking about making Michael president. That isn't what I asked. Ruth turned off the water. Yes, she whispered. I knew. Alina felt the betrayal again, fresh and exact. How long? A few weeks, and you said nothing. Your father begged me not to get involved. I am your daughter, I know. You watched me plan his birthday dinner while knowing he was going to humiliate me at it. Ruth began to cry. I didn't know Michael planned to announce it there. But you knew enough. Yes, Alina looked down at the dish towel in her hands. Why? Ruth's answer came slowly. Because I thought you would be angry, but you would recover. Michael? When he feels rejected, he disappears. He always has. Your father was terrified he would leave again. Alina laughed through tears. So all of you hurt the person least likely to abandon you. Ruth covered her mouth. Alina continued, her voice quieter now. Do you know what that teaches someone? It teaches them that loyalty makes them the safest person to wound. Alina, I'm sorry. I believe you. Ruth reached for her. Alina stepped back. But I'm not ready for a hug. Her mother nodded, crying. That night Alina left without opening the business documents Thomas had placed on the desk in the den. She cried the entire drive home, but she did not turn around. The new year arrived with freezing rain. Vanessa's company was preparing to open a hotel in Charleston, and Alina threw herself into work. She spent 3 days inspecting furniture deliveries, solving a fabric shortage, and negotiating with a lighting supplier. It felt good to be needed in a place where need did not come disguised as love. On January 19th, Michael called at 11:47 p.m. Alina was awake, reading in bed. She stared at his name until the call stopped, then it rang again. She answered. What happened? Michael's breathing was uneven. Dad's at the hospital. Everything inside her went cold. What happened? He collapsed at the house. Mom called an ambulance. They think it's a stroke. Alina was already standing. I'm coming. She drove through icy streets with both hands gripping the wheel. At the hospital, Ruth stood in the emergency waiting area wearing slippers and Thomas's winter coat over her nightgown. Alina ran to her. They took him for imaging, Ruth said. They won't tell me anything yet. Alina wrapped her arms around her mother without thinking. Ruth held on as though she were drowning. Michael arrived 40 minutes later, pale and breathless. Claire and Noah had stayed home. How is he? Alina told him what little they knew. Michael sat down and covered his face. For the next hour, the three of them waited beneath fluorescent lights while a television in the corner played a cheerful late-night game show with the sound muted. When the neurologist finally appeared, Alina knew from his calm expression that Thomas was alive. The stroke had been moderate but treatable. Thomas had weakness on his left side and trouble speaking, but they had intervened quickly. The doctor expected significant recovery with therapy, though no one could promise how much. Ruth began sobbing with relief. Michael walked to the far wall. Alina followed him after a moment. He stared through the dark window. This is because of me, he whispered. No, he knew. Knew what? Michael's eyes filled. How bad it is. Alina's stomach tight. How bad? Michael did not answer. She stepped closer. How bad is the company? We have maybe 5 weeks of working capital. She stared at him. After the loan, we spent most of it on Dallas, inventory, construction, marketing. What about the revolver? Frozen pending review. Supplier terms? 2 major vendors moved us to cash in advance. Payroll? Covered for this month. And next month, he looked away. Alina felt the old machinery inside her start immediately. Cash, receivables, inventory, assets, land, creditors, payroll dates, customer deposits. She could almost see the spreadsheet forming behind her eyes. She hated herself for it. Michael whispered, I thought Dallas would catch up. You thought? I had forecasts. You had my model. His face went pale. There was no point denying it. I changed the assumptions. I know. I thought you were too conservative. And when Meridian fell through, I thought we could replace it. Alina looked at him for a long time. Then Michael said, I'm sorry. She turned toward the window. For using your work, for everything. You don't get to say that in a hospital waiting room and make it disappear. I know. Do you? Yes, she turned then. Michael was crying. I wanted Dad to choose me, he said. I knew what removing you would do. I told myself it was necessary, but I knew. Alina said nothing. He didn't want to announce it at the birthday dinner. That was me. The truth landed with a strange quietness. I wanted everyone to hear it, Michael continued. I wanted one room where I was the person Dad was proud of. Alina's eyes burned. And was it worth it? Michael shook his head. No. The intensive care door opened before she could answer. Ruth came out and said Thomas was awake. They entered together. Thomas looked small beneath the hospital blankets. His left hand rested unmoving near his side. When he saw Alina, tears immediately formed in his eyes. Elle, he struggled. She hurried to his bedside. I'm here. His right hand found hers. Michael stood at the foot of the bed, unable to look at either of them. Thomas tried to say something. The word came slowly. Company? Alina shook her head. Not now. Thomas became agitated. House. Ruth looked at Alina. Thomas's eyes filled with fear. The house is okay, Alina said, though she did not know whether it was true. Don't worry about it now. He squeezed her hand. For the next 3 days, Alina stayed close to the hospital. She helped Ruth understand the therapy schedule. She spoke with doctors. She made lists of medications. She brought Thomas his glasses, a sweater, and the old radio he liked to listen to in the mornings. She did not go to Carter and Sons. On the 4th day, Michael came to her apartment carrying a banker's box. Alina looked at it and almost laughed at the symmetry. What is that? Everything. He placed the box on her dining table. Inside were cash flow statements, loan documents, vendor notices, payroll records, sales projections, and contracts. I'm not asking you to come back, he said. Good. I'm asking you to tell me if there's a way to save it. Alina stood with her arms crossed. You fired me. I know. You took my analysis and altered it. I know. You put Mom and Dad's house at risk. I know. You borrowed against your own house without fully explaining it to Claire. Michael looked startled. She called me. His face fell. And now, Alina said, you want me to fix it. Michael looked at the floor. Yes. The honesty infuriated her more than an excuse would have. No, he nodded. Okay? He turned toward the door. Alina stared at the box. Wait. Michael stopped. She hated that she could not stop caring. Leave the documents. He did. For 6 hours, Alina reviewed the numbers. The situation was worse than she expected, but not impossible. The Dallas showroom was bleeding cash. Inventory purchases had been based on projections that never materialized. The celebrity designer partnership had cost nearly 4 times what Michael had originally described. Yet beneath all the damage, the core manufacturing business was still healthy. Long-time customers were placing orders. The factory itself remained productive. The company was not dead. It was being dragged underwater by an expansion that no one wanted to admit had failed. At midnight, Alina created a plan. Close Dallas. Sell the leasehold improvements if possible. Liquidate excess showroom inventory. Freeze all expansion. Negotiate temporary extensions with suppliers. Sell unused land behind the original factory rather than risk the family home. Rebuild the bank line around the profitable core operation. Cut executive salaries before touching hourly wages. Ask 3 major customers for accelerated deposits in exchange for price guarantees. Cancel every consulting contract that did not directly produce revenue. Replace optimism with arithmetic. At 1 a.m, she stared at the plan on her screen. Then she deleted it. She could not do this again. She went to bed and slept badly. The next morning, she recreated the entire plan from memory. At 10, she called Michael. I'll meet you once, she said. I'm not returning to the company. They met in a quiet conference room at the hospital while Thomas slept upstairs. Alina placed the plan between them. Michael read it slowly. Close Dallas? Yes, that's the whole strategy. That's the problem. We'll lose almost everything we invested. You already lost it. The question is whether you lose the rest of the company trying to prove you didn't. Michael leaned back, rubbing his eyes. Alina continued. You need to tell the bank before they tell you. You need to show them a voluntary restructuring plan. You need to put your own salary at 0 for 6 months. He nodded, and Dad's house comes out of the collateral package. The bank won't agree? Then sell the land. That land has been in the family since Grandpa bought the factory. So has the house your mother sleeps in. Michael looked down. Alina pushed the papers toward him. And you need to call every major supplier personally. What do I say? The truth. He gave a bitter smile. You make that sound easy. No, I make it sound necessary. Michael looked at the plan again. Will you come to the bank meeting? Alina hesitated. No, his face fell, but I'll help you prepare. For the next 2 weeks, they met every evening. It was the strangest work Alina had ever done. She sat across from the brother who had betrayed her and taught him how to dismantle the dream he had pushed her aside to pursue. She showed him how to present cash flow honestly, how to distinguish pride from value, how to call a supplier before a missed payment instead of after it, and how to negotiate without pretending strength he did not have. Michael listened. For once, he did not argue. One night after they had spent 3 hours reviewing vendor balances, he said, Why are you helping me? Alina closed the spreadsheet. I'm not helping you. He looked confused. I'm helping Mom, I'm helping Dad. I'm helping Louis and Nina and the people on the floor who had nothing to do with this. Michael nodded. That's fair. She watched him gather the papers. And maybe, she added, I'm helping the brother I used to have before everything became a competition. Michael stopped. He did not answer. But the next evening he brought 2 coffees, remembered exactly how she took hers, and placed one beside her without comment. The bank meeting lasted 3 hours. Alina did not attend, but she sat in her office at Vanessa's company staring at her phone until Michael finally sent one message. They'll consider it. It was not approval, but it was not rejection. 2 days later, Michael called every major supplier. Some were angry. One demanded payment immediately. Another agreed to a 90-day schedule because Alina had spent years building trust with them. Michael later told her that the supplier's owner had said, I'm doing this because your sister never lied to me. Don't make me regret trusting the same family. Michael had not known how to respond. Good, Alina told him. Remember the feeling. The unused land sold faster than expected to a neighboring logistics company. Thomas was furious when he learned about it from his rehabilitation bed. My father bought that land, he said, speech still slow but clearer. Alina sat beside him. And now selling it is protecting the house he helped you buy. Thomas looked away. Michael should have asked me. Alina almost laughed. Dad, do you hear yourself? He looked back at her. You signed away Mom's house without asking her. Thomas's expression changed. The truth sat between them. He whispered, yes. For the first time, Alina saw shame in his eyes that was not merely embarrassment over conflict. It was recognition. The bank accepted the restructuring plan conditionally. The land sale reduced enough debt to release the Carter home from collateral. Dallas closed in March. The company took a painful write-down, but the original factory remained open. Michael stood before the employees and admitted what had happened. Nina later called Alina. He told everyone it was his mistake. Alina was surprised. All of it? He said he expanded too quickly, ignored warnings, and used assumptions that weren't properly reviewed. Did he mention me? Yes, Alina waited. He said you warned him. Alina looked out the window of her new office. How did people react? Louis crossed his arms for 20 minutes and then told Michael he was an idiot. Alina laughed. That sounds like Louis. And Michael said, I know. That surprised her more. At the rehabilitation center, Thomas slowly regained strength. His speech improved. One afternoon, Alina visited and found him practicing walking between parallel bars. He insisted she watch. Look, he said carefully. Old man, new trick. Alina laughed and applauded. After therapy, they sat outside in a small courtyard. Winter was loosening its grip, but the trees were still bare. Thomas was quiet for several minutes. Then he said, I was coward. Alina looked at him. He struggled with the next words, partly from emotion and partly from the lingering effects of the stroke. I knew Michael wanted your place. Alina's chest tightened. I knew he resented you, and I knew you would survive it. She stared at the branches above them. That was your reason? Thomas's eyes filled. You always survived everything. Alina felt something break open inside her. That doesn't mean it didn't hurt. I know. No, Dad, I don't think you did. He looked down. You gave Michael what he wanted because you were afraid he would leave again. You took from me because you believed I would stay. Thomas began to cry. Alina had spent her childhood thinking fathers knew where to put pain. Now she saw an old man with shaking hands who had made a terrible decision because he loved both children badly in different ways. I am sorry, he said. Alina wiped her eyes. I needed you to choose what was right, not who was easier to disappoint. Thomas nodded. I failed. The words were simple. They were also the first full admission she had ever heard from him. Alina wanted to forgive immediately. That was her old habit too, to rush toward repair so no one had to sit in discomfort. She did not. I love you, she said, but I'm still angry. Thomas nodded again. You can be. That permission mattered more than she expected. A week later, Ruth asked Alina to meet her for lunch. They chose a quiet cafe near the hospital. Ruth looked nervous from the moment she sat down. I've been thinking about what you said at Christmas, she began. Alina waited. About loyalty making you safe to hurt. Alina looked at her mother carefully. Ruth twisted her wedding ring. I did that to you long before the birthday dinner. What do you mean? When Michael got into trouble in college, I called you. When your father was sick, I called you. When the company had problems, I asked you to check on him. When your aunt needed help moving, I asked you because I knew you would say yes. I used to tell people you were my easy child. Alina looked down at the table. Ruth's voice broke. I thought it was praise. It didn't feel like praise. I know that now. Alina remembered birthdays shortened by emergencies, weekends given away, vacations interrupted because Ruth said, your father really needs you. She remembered how rarely anyone asked what Alina needed. I was proud of being easy, Alina admitted. I thought it meant I was good. Ruth reached across the table but stopped before touching her hand. I'm sorry I made goodness feel like never causing trouble. Alina's eyes filled. That apology reached a younger version of her, the girl who had learned to solve problems quietly because praise came fastest when she required the least. This time, Alina reached across the table first. She took her mother's hand. Spring arrived slowly. Alina's work with Vanessa grew. She was promoted to vice president of procurement and development. For the first time in years, she traveled for reasons that had nothing to do with family emergencies. She visited projects in Charleston, Austin, Denver, and Savannah. She started taking pottery classes on Saturday mornings, where she was terrible at centering clay and found the failure strangely enjoyable. One evening, she received a message from Aaron. He had seen her name in an industry article about Vanessa's newest hotel project. Congratulations. Looks like you finally let someone else handle the emergencies. Alina laughed out loud. They exchanged messages, then coffee, then dinner. Aaron was divorced now and had a 6-year-old daughter named Sophie. Nothing about reconnecting was simple. Alina did not expect it to be. Aaron apologized for some of the cruel things he had said when they broke up. Alina apologized for treating every request for balance as though he were asking her to abandon her family. On their fourth dinner, Aaron asked, "Do you still feel responsible for everyone?" Alina considered the question. "Sometimes. And what do you do?" "Usually I make a spreadsheet." He laughed, and then I remind myself I'm allowed to close it. At Carter & Sons, Michael changed too. He sold his luxury car and began driving one of the company's old pickups. He moved his office from the executive suite to a smaller room beside operations. He stopped using the phrase "new Carter era." He canceled the marketing agency contract and began visiting customers himself. More importantly, he started asking questions. Louis told Alina, "Your brother finally discovered he has 2 ears." Alina smiled. "Try not to scare him away from the skill." Still, Alina kept her distance. She helped only when a decision affected her ownership interest or her parents directly. She refused to return to daily operations. Michael asked once. "I could create a co-president role." "No." "COO? "No." "Board chair?" Michael. "Okay," he smiled. "I had to try." Alina did agree to join a newly formed family board with 2 independent outside advisors. She insisted on written governance rules, financial transparency, and a policy requiring approval from an independent director before family property could ever be pledged as collateral again. Thomas called the rules Alina's constitution. She took that as a compliment. The real reconciliation, however, did not happen in a boardroom. It happened at the old family lake house in July. Ruth had begged everyone to come for a weekend. The house had belonged to Alina's grandparents and sat beside a narrow lake 2 hours north of the city. As children, Alina and Michael had spent entire summers there swimming, catching fireflies, and fighting over who got the hammock. The first evening after dinner, Noah found an old box of photographs. He carried it to the porch. "Dad, is this you?" Michael looked at a photo and burst out laughing. Alina leaned over. The picture showed 10-year-old Michael standing on the dock in underwear, covered in green algae after falling into the shallow end. "You told me you destroyed that," Michael said. Alina grinned. "I lied." Noah laughed so hard he nearly dropped the photograph. For an hour they went through the box. There was Alina at 13 holding a fish she had not actually caught, Michael at 6 asleep with his face in a bowl of popcorn, Ruth with huge 1980s sunglasses, Thomas young and dark-haired, carrying both children on his shoulders. Then Noah pulled out a photo of Alina and Michael sitting together on the dock. Alina was about 16, Michael was 12, his head rested on her shoulder. On the back in their grandmother's handwriting were the words, "They fight like thunder, love like rain." Michael read it silently. Alina looked toward the lake. After everyone else went inside, they remained on the porch. Michael held the photo. "I remember that day," he said. "I don't." "I had gone into a fight with some kid at camp." Alina smiled. "That sounds right. He said Dad liked you more because you were smarter." Alina turned. Michael laughed softly. "I punched him." "You punched someone for saying Dad liked me more?" "I was 12. I'm not sure that improves the logic." He rubbed the edge of the photograph. "You found me behind the boathouse afterward. I thought Dad was going to kill me. What did I do?" "You told him the kid pushed me first." Alina stared at him. "I lied for you?" "Terribly, Dad knew." They both smiled, then Michael's expression changed. "I spent years thinking you had everything I wanted." "What did you think I had?" "Dad's respect, Grandpa's respect, the company, a place." Alina looked down at her hands. "I spent years thinking you had everything I wanted." Michael frowned. "You could leave," she said. "You went to California. You failed at things and came home and everyone celebrated you." Was terrified that if I ever stopped being useful, I wouldn't know who I was to this family. Michael absorbed that slowly. "I thought you stayed because you wanted control." "I stayed because Dad asked me to." "And then?" Alina looked toward the black water. "Then I forgot how to leave." Michael's voice was quiet. "I'm sorry I forced you out," she swallowed. "I'm sorry I made your whole life look like a failure compared with mine." He looked at her. "You didn't." "I did sometimes, maybe not intentionally." But I enjoyed being the responsible one. I enjoyed knowing Dad depended on me. I judged you for leaving because part of me was jealous that you were brave enough to go. Michael nodded. That's the first mean thing you've admitted all year. She elbowed him. He laughed. For a few minutes they were children again. Then Michael said, I don't expect you to forgive me. Alina considered the word. Forgiveness had always sounded to her like a door that swung open in one motion. But perhaps it was more like rebuilding a house after a storm. Some rooms could be repaired quickly. Others needed new foundations. Some things could never look exactly as they had before. I think I am forgiving you, she said. I'm just not finished. Michael nodded. That's more than I deserve. No, Alina said. Don't do that. What? Don't turn guilt into another kind of performance. Just do better. He smiled faintly. Yes, ma'am. When they went inside, Ruth was pretending not to have been watching them through the kitchen window. By autumn, Carter and Sons had stabilized. The company was smaller than before Michael's expansion, but healthier. It returned to profitability in September. Employees received modest bonuses. The bank restored part of the revolving line. Thomas officially retired, this time without secret meetings or surprise announcements. At the retirement dinner, he asked for permission before standing to speak. He leaned on his cane beside the table and looked first at Alina, then at Michael. I spent many years believing a father's job was to keep the family together, he began. I learned too late that keeping peace is not the same as keeping truth. The room became quiet. I hurt my daughter because I trusted her strength more than I respected her pain. I thought because Alina could carry something, I had the right to put it on her shoulders. Alina's eyes filled. And I hurt my son because I gave him approval when I should have given him guidance. I was so afraid he would leave again that I confused supporting him with agreeing with him. Michael looked down. Thomas took a slow breath. I was proud of both my children, but I made them compete for proof. Ruth covered her mouth. Thomas looked directly at Alina. My daughter saved this company more times than anyone knows, but I am proudest that she finally learned she did not have to save us to be loved. Alina began to cry, then Thomas looked at Michael. My son nearly destroyed this company. A nervous laugh moved through the room. Michael smiled painfully. And then he did something harder than pretending he had never failed. He admitted it. He stayed. He repaired what he could. He accepted that some trust had to be earned again. Thomas raised his glass with a trembling hand. To my children, may they spend less time earning love than I taught them to. Alina stood and hugged him. Michael joined them. For a moment, the three of them held one another in a room where, 1 year earlier, pride and silence had torn them apart. It was not a perfect ending. Perfect endings belonged to stories where betrayal erased itself once everyone apologized. Real families carried scars. There were still moments when Alina remembered the birthday dinner and felt heat rise in her chest. There were still meetings where Michael spoke too confidently, and she had to stop herself from assuming the worst. Thomas sometimes tried to avoid uncomfortable subjects, and Ruth still occasionally asked Alina to be the bigger person, a phrase Alina had finally learned to challenge. But the family had changed. They had learned to say the difficult thing before it became a secret. They had learned that strength did not mean endless tolerance. They had learned that love without respect could become entitlement, sacrifice without boundaries could become resentment, and forgiveness without accountability was only another form of silence. A year after Thomas's retirement, Alina returned to the factory for the company's 50th anniversary. The lobby had been renovated. Old photographs covered one wall, beginning with her grandfather in the rented garage. Another showed Thomas as a young man sanding a dining table. There were pictures of workers, delivery trucks, showroom openings, company picnics, and Christmas parties. Near the center was a photograph Alina had never seen. She was standing on the factory floor at 31, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by employees during the difficult year after the warehouse fire. Everyone looked exhausted. Alina was laughing at something outside the frame. Under the photograph was a small plaque. Elena Carter, the years we survived because someone stayed. She stared at it. Michael appeared beside her. You hate it? I told you I didn't want anything named after me. It's not named after you. It literally has my name on it, he smiled. The board voted. You control the board agenda. Independent governance, remember? She shook her head. Then she noticed another plaque beside it. Michael Carter, the year we learned failure can become responsibility. Alina burst out laughing. You approved that? Noah wrote it. Of course he did. Michael stood beside her, hands in his pockets. I wanted both. Alina's smile softened. Why? Because if we only hang up the parts that make us look good, we'll teach the next generation the same lies we believed. That more than any apology told Alina how far her brother had come. The anniversary celebration filled the factory courtyard. Former employees returned with grandchildren. Customers flew in. Ruth danced with Thomas beneath strings of lights. Louis gave a speech that was far too long and made everyone cry anyway. Near sunset, Alina found herself sitting on the loading dock beside Michael. For years, she had looked at this place and seen obligation. Now she could see it for what it was, a building, a business, a history, not her identity, not her proof of love. Michael handed her a paper cup of lemonade. You ever regret leaving? Alina thought about it. There had been nights, especially in the first months, when she had regretted everything. She had regretted walking out of the birthday dinner. She had regretted not fighting for her role. She had regretted allowing Michael to take control. She had regretted ignoring her father's first phone calls. She had even regretted helping after the business nearly collapsed because part of her feared she was teaching the family that they could always hurt her and still receive rescue. But regret, she had learned, was not always a message telling you that you made the wrong decision. Sometimes regret was grief for the version of life you wished had been possible. She wished her father had valued her before losing her. She wished her brother had asked for a place beside her instead of taking hers. She wished her mother had defended her before apologizing afterward. She wished she had learned boundaries before resentment taught them to her. Those wishes could exist without meaning she should have stayed. No, she said finally. I regret how it happened. I don't regret leaving. Michael nodded. Glad you left. Alina raised an eyebrow. That sounds rude. I mean it. If you stayed, I would have kept blaming you for everything I felt about myself. Dad would have kept avoiding conflict. Mom would have kept asking you to hold everyone together. You would have kept fixing us. Nothing would have changed. Alina looked across the courtyard at Thomas laughing with Noah. And if the company had failed? Michael took a sip of lemonade. Then it would have failed. She turned toward him, surprised. He shrugged. Spent my whole life thinking keeping the company alive was the same as keeping the family alive. It isn't. Alina smiled. That might be the smartest thing you've ever said. Don't tell anyone. Years earlier, Alina had believed family loyalty meant staying no matter how badly you were treated. Michael had believed love could be measured by who received the title, the praise, the chair at the head of the table. Thomas had believed peace was achieved by disappointing the child least likely to leave. They had all been wrong. Loyalty was not silence. Love was not preference. Peace was not avoidance. And reconciliation was not returning to the way things used to be. It was creating something new from the truth. Later that night, Thomas called Alina into the lobby and handed her a small envelope. Inside was an old brass key. She recognized it immediately. The garage? Thomas nodded. The original rented garage where her grandfather had started Carter and Sons still stood behind an auto shop across town. The family had bought the property years later for sentimental reasons. I thought Michael would get this. So did Michael, Thomas said. He told me it should be yours. Why? He said you understand what it means to build something without being guaranteed it will work. Alina closed her fingers around the key. What am I supposed to do with it? Thomas smiled. Anything, nothing. It is not responsibility, it is just yours. That sentence nearly broke her heart because it was the first gift her father had given her that came without an obligation attached. Months later, Alina turned the garage into a small workshop and scholarship space for young people interested in furniture design, logistics, and skilled trades. Carter and Sons donated materials. Vanessa's company sponsored equipment. Local schools sent students on weekends. Alina refused to name the program after herself. Noah suggested calling it the name stayed. At the opening, Michael brought a wooden sign made by the factory team. The garage build something worth staying FOR. Alina read the words twice. Then she took a marker, crossed out the final word, and wrote beneath it, build something worth choosing. Michael smiled. That's better. The first group of students arrived the next morning. One girl, 16 years old and painfully shy, lingered after everyone else left. Ms. Carter? Yes. My family has a restaurant, the girl said. Expect me to run it someday. Alina smiled gently. Do you want to? The girl looked startled by the question. I don't know. That's a good answer. My parents would be disappointed if I left. They might. The girl waited for Alina to tell her what to do. Instead, Alina said, love your family. Help them when you freely choose to help. Learn everything you can, but don't confuse being needed with being valued, and don't build your whole life around preventing other people's disappointment. Girl nodded slowly. Alina watched her leave and wondered what she would have done at 24 if someone had said those words to her. Perhaps she still would have gone home. Perhaps she still would have stayed 15 years. Perhaps some lessons could only be understood after paying their full price. That evening, Alina drove to her parents' house for dinner. Michael was already there, arguing with Thomas about baseball. Ruth was in the kitchen. Noah sat at the table doing homework. Alina entered without knocking. Ruth looked up and smiled. You're late. Traffic, Michael called from the den. She's always late now that she has a life. Alina shouted back, I can leave. No, you can't, Noah yelled. Grandma made pie? Alina laughed and hung her coat beside Michael's. For a moment she stood in the hallway listening to her family, not the family she had once imagined, not the family that never hurt one another, not the family where love automatically produced fairness. This family had lied, competed, failed, resented, apologized, repaired, and tried again. Alina no longer believed forgiveness meant pretending those things had not happened. She believed forgiveness meant they no longer got to decide what happened next. At dinner, Thomas asked about the garage. Michael complained that Alina had stolen 3 of his best craftspeople for Saturday classes. Ruth told both of them to stop arguing. Noah announced that he wanted to run Carter and Sons someday. Everyone froze. Then Alina and Michael spoke at the exact same time. Only if you want to? The table went silent. Noah looked between them. Then Ruth started laughing. Thomas laughed next. Soon everyone was laughing, even Michael. Alina leaned back in her chair and looked around the table. There had been a time when she wanted her family to regret losing her. Now she was grateful they had learned how to have her without owning her. That was the reconciliation none of them had known they needed. Not a return, but a new relationship. Not forgetting the betrayal, but understanding it well enough to stop repeating it. Not proving who had been right, but learning how to love one another without requiring someone else to be wrong. And as Alina listened to her father complain about the pie crust, her mother defend the recipe, her brother tease Noah, and the ordinary noise of family fill the room, she understood something she wished she had known years earlier. Sometimes the person who leaves is not abandoning the family. Sometimes leaving is the first honest thing anyone has done. Sometimes distance reveals the rules that love had hidden. Sometimes regret is not a road back to the past. It is simply the ache of realizing how much pain could have been avoided if people had been brave enough to tell the truth sooner. And sometimes, when the truth finally arrives, a family does not break. It becomes real.